Welcome to the Great Basin Prescribed Fire and Smoke Transport Briefing for Friday, March 21st. Currently, we have quite a bit of prescribed fire activity occurring across the Great Basin and a few new starts here in the red you can see in Utah and southern Nevada and areas that are a little bit drier. Otherwise, over the last 7 to 14 days, we've seen precipitation move across the Great Basin, but really mostly in northern and central areas. And those are some areas that have seen some above normal precipitation, even down into parts of southern Utah almost 2 weeks ago or 1 to 2 weeks ago. However, the drier spots continue to be northwest Nevada down into southern Nevada. You can see well below normal, and even over the last week, a very light, if any, precipitation in most of those areas. So looking at our snowfall the last 72 hours, you can see we have had some new snowfall, especially across parts of Idaho into Wyoming and down into Utah, although amounts have been fairly modest. The snow depth is indicated on the right. And looking at the snowpack, our snowpack is still near normal for much of the Great Basin. There are some areas that are just above normal in southwest Idaho and northwest Nevada. And then areas that are still below normal are over southern areas of the Great Basin. Although the snowpack has come up in the last couple of weeks with some precipitation moving in, we will see some drier conditions down there for the next week. Looking at our drought conditions, the evaporative demand drought index showing the short-term changes in drought, you can see with the drier conditions over the last several weeks and really over the last several months in the south, despite some recent moisture, we are still showing some drought signatures down south. Looking at our satellite image from this morning, this is a little bit different of a picture. You can see here the western U.S. here on the right. Looking at the weather picture, you can see plenty of moisture moving in with clouds and showers increasing today ahead of a system moving in from the Pacific. Otherwise, drier conditions in the south. So for later today, you can see that moisture move in over the northern half of the Great Basin. This will also pick up winds a bit for at least some better dispersion. So again, continue to look at prescribed burning opportunities coming over the next several days. Transport winds will be a little breezy on the western and northern side of the Great Basin, but most of the gusts in the 20s to around 30 miles per hour, with the exception of some of the higher elevations, and then mixing heights relatively high. Temperatures today will be near or above normal, highs in the 50s over the northern half of the Great Basin and 70s down south. Relative humidity will only be below 20% over southern areas of the Great Basin. As we move into Saturday, we do have some ridging off the west coast, but still moisture spilling over the top of that ridge as the system moves through for some continued shower activity, especially over northern portions of the Great Basin, with mostly just cloud cover further south. Otherwise, dispersion will still be fairly good with some breezier winds pushing over the eastern two-thirds of the Great Basin. And you can see that on the transport winds. The winds will be a little bit gustier with more west to northwest winds than what we will see today, but also over western Wyoming down into northern Utah is probably where the strongest winds will be, where we could see some gusts above 40 miles per hour. So mixing heights still high. Temperatures will remain fairly consistent on Saturday to what we'll see today, with 50s over the northern half of the region, 70s down south. Relative humidity over southern areas will improve somewhat, but still some pockets below 20%. Moving into Sunday, we finally see some of that ridging, still some showers and moisture up north, up in Idaho and Wyoming, otherwise drying conditions for Nevada and Utah. We'll also see some lighter winds over much of the western half of the Great Basin, and still some of those gusty northwest winds, keeping dispersion higher in parts of Idaho, Wyoming, and eastern Utah. And you can see that on the transport winds. Again, winds Sunday not quite as gusty as what we'll see Saturday, but still breezy across the north. Mixing heights will remain high. And looking at temperatures, we'll finally start to see that warm up starting over the western half of the Great Basin and up into southwest Idaho as that ridge builds in. So temperatures climbing quite a bit above normal, at least 5 to 10 degrees above normal. And we will see some 80s in the far southern areas, and relative humidity will start dropping again as this ridge moves in. 3-day forecast amounts of precipitation, you can see here the heaviest amounts will be up into parts of central and eastern Idaho and Wyoming, down into northern Utah in the higher elevations, where we will see several new inches of snow, possibly above 10 inches in some of the higher peaks. Otherwise, lighter showers over the northern half of Nevada with those continued dry conditions down south. As we move into early next week, the ridge really starts to set in, so temperatures will continue to warm to well above normal across the Great Basin, Still a few clouds, maybe a few showers early Monday up in the north. Otherwise, winds will be decreasing, so dispersion will drop as well. We will continue to see that ridge move across on Tuesday, although we might see a little bit of wind in Nevada to increase some of that dispersion as that ridge moves eastward. And then on Wednesday, dry conditions with the ridging as well, so warm temperatures, drier conditions. And then Thursday, we will start to see another trough of low pressure move into the northwest, so we will see potentially some additional moisture. So looking at the precipitation for days 4 and 5, this is going into the Monday through Wednesday time period. You can still see those dry conditions continuing with the exception of the far north. And then as we move later in the week with that next system moving into the Pacific Northwest, that will increase our shower chances once again for mainly Idaho and western Wyoming and possibly down into the northern Sierra, with some lighter showers across northern Nevada or Utah, but again, fairly minimal precipitation with drier conditions to the south. And you can see the 7-day total precip. Obviously, we're seeing the higher concentration of precipitation up north. The 8 to 14-day outlook taking us from the end of March into the first few days of April show warmer temperatures, especially for the Four Corners area with drier conditions, but that above normal precipitation signature still continues for the Pacific Northwest into northern and western areas of the Great Basin. So we are still expecting moisture to move across the region. Again, most of that will remain out of far southern areas, but we could see some light showers in the far south as well, but the better chances of moisture will be further north. That concludes the webcast for today. Check back on Monday for the latest updates.